But welcome to Association Chat, your weekly online discussion for the association community where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm the host of Association Chat, KiKi L'Italien, and I want to give a quick shout out to our wonderful sponsor, Fontiva. Fontiva, the AMS for Innovation, for their ongoing support of Association Chat and the community here. If you're on Crowdcast, or if you're listening later on iTunes or Google Play or iHeartRadio or Stitcher, you can just visit fontiva.com. They have a fantastic blog for the association community. And with that, there is no doubt that things are changing, and so are our workplaces. With trends like flexible work environments, people analytics, and blended workforces with full-time employees working alongside freelancers, there are definitely some complicated new stressors that could cause problems, not just for the employee, but also for the HR manager or CEO or executive director dealing with them. But where there's a need, eventually solutions do appear. And enter today's guests, Dave Will, co-founder and CEO for PropFuel, and Jamie Nodder, partner at WXO, WorkXO Solutions. Welcome to the chat, Dave and Jamie.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yay! I know. And I love how festive everything is. You know, Jamie had, you guys didn't see it, but Jamie, at one point, before we figured out the lighting wasn't working so well, had a fantastic, beautiful Christmas tree behind him. Yes, yes. And
right next to the palm tree and the cat.
Yes.
Yeah.
I told you the cat would be here. All right, I like that.
And Dave, you have your little Christmas gnome dude, and that's awesome. So, Jamie, I want to start with you. I don't have a whole lot, by the way, for holidays, but trust me, it's all in the spirit. So, Jamie, I wanted to start with you. WorkXO has a lot going on with what we're talking about today because it's a platform using the workplace genome. It's consulting and training, and also you have this great show, the Culture Chat podcast. But I'm guessing that you find yourself talking with a lot of heads of HR and executive directors who are concerned with making sure that they're doing what they need to do to have a strong workplace. So what are, and this is the first official question, what are some of the most common concerns you hear from those who reach out to you?
I think number one is recruiting. Like people want the best talent. Like that gets thrown out there a lot, and they definitely have on their radar screen that if they're not paying attention to culture, if they're not paying attention to the workplace, they're going to lose people. I mean, it's the classic, like, I just hired the best person and I'm worried that in a year I'll like invest in training them and getting them up to speed and then they'll leave. And I think particularly when the economy heats up a little too, they get a little more focused on that. And so suddenly they're like, well, I haven't done anything on culture. What should I be doing? That's usually how it starts.
Wow. And I mean, you know, I think I need to do something with culture. That can go in so many different directions. And I mentioned a little bit about the gig economy or something like dealing with freelancers, having a blended workforce. And that's another thing, you know, with that in mind, you do have people who are, you know, kind of in and out, and they don't really have the same kind of qualms about, you know, jumping into something and maybe not staying there forever, right? That's not necessarily the expectation. So Dave, I'm thinking that employee engagement, so this is the part of things where I feel like I need to bring you in to talk a little bit about that, because PropFuel is described as a platform that turns your employees into engaged team members, right? So could you tell me a little bit about the statistics behind or kind of what you found out with the research behind engagement, what works for engagement, and why it's so important for workplace?
Yeah, there's it's interesting. Company culture is a huge topic, but it's something a lot of people, and Jamie, I'd be curious in your thoughts on this, but there's a lot of people don't like to invest money in company culture. They're willing to invest thought and maybe a little bit of time, but not even that much time. They want company culture just to be something that appears. And it's because it's difficult to associate that with an ROI. Now, employee engagement is one element of a company culture that I think, fortunately, I didn't need to come up with these stats. Gallup came up with a ton of stats, and I don't have them right in front of me, although I can get them very quickly. But they came up with some amazing stats, which this is pretty rude, isn't it? I'm sitting here, I'm
Yeah,
stalling.
it's totally rude. The audio
But listen to
leader.
this. So I was going to generalize the stats, but some of the stats that we found: 54% lower turnover, most impressive one, when you have an engaged workforce versus a workforce that is not engaged. Now, I can't define exactly what engaged means and what non-engaged means, but when you compare companies of those that are engaged to those that are not engaged, generally, you're dealing with a 54% lower turnover, 40% fewer quality issues, 17% higher productivity, 20% higher sales, 21% higher profitability, and 10% higher customer satisfaction. Now, we could debate what the accuracy of these numbers, and we could probably debate what, how high and how low they could be. The reality is, no matter what, an engaged employee is a better thing for a company than a non-engaged employee. And so that's what we're focused on doing. We're trying to figure out ways to get people thinking about the business as opposed to coming in and pressing buttons. And I remember there were times when people would come to me in my last business, Peach, which I think some of you know, where people would come to me and we'd have more or less a directive. We'd say something we need to accomplish. Here's a goal. Here's something that we need to do for a client or for ourselves or whatever. And a common question was like, okay, so how do we do that? And my answer oftentimes, because I didn't know, would be, I can't tell you what buttons to press. We just need to figure it out. And that's the difference between an engaged employee and one that's not engaged.
Wow. And I think about
wow. I know. The insight is unbelievable.
It is.
Jamie, your turn. Tag.
Mind.
You guys, this is the last time I'm having you on here. Do you see what happens? Hey, Sai. Okay, so Sai, I should actually invite on here. He can probably talk about the workplace. He's the guy behind Crowdcast, which is what we're on right now. Yay! So
awesome.
Hey, yeah.
Thanks, Sai.
So the thing is that I think that all of the challenges we mentioned before, workplace engagement, obviously there are those statistics because workplace engagement has been something that has been an important factor of keeping people around and keeping people happy for a long time. But now we have these new things that have come into the workplace, some new situations that make it a little bit more challenging. For instance, and I think PropFuel is really good for this sort of thing, or it seems like it would be. But like, what do you do when you have a virtual team? Or what do you do when we're facing situations in the workplace, the way that it's set up, that we couldn't possibly have a ton of research on because they're new, So we're trying to solve these problems on the fly. Jamie, are you hearing people coming to you with these types of concerns, saying, look, we're sort of decentralizing. Not everybody comes into the office every day. So how are we going to build a culture when I don't even see everyone that works for us?
Yeah, we've had a couple of couple different angles on that. We've had organizations that have just acquired a new company and they're in a different location, right? And so they had a tech company, and they had really built a culture of transparency. Like that was huge. That was already hugely important to them. And they knew it drove their success. But they suddenly had a new location, the first place where they are basically getting employees that didn't work in the same headquarters, basically. And part of their culture assessment and analysis was that they valued transparency. They didn't know how to do it when you weren't in the office. That's a different set of processes. And so when we got to the point of actually doing action planning with them, they developed sort of what we call plays in their culture playbook. One of them was like, spend more money on plane tickets. Like, that's it. I need you people to come here more, and we need to go there more, period. Like, that's not the only play they did. That's not the only way. Obviously, they use technology. They're a technology company. But I mean, they needed to do things differently in order to maintain the culture that they already knew drove their success. And like, that's sort of my, I think Dave and I are on the same page when it comes to engagement and culture. They're kind of sort of two sides of the same coin. Um, the statistic that scares me about engagement, per your original question, Dave, is we spend $1 billion a year trying to fix employee engagement, and we haven't moved the needle in 10 years. So like,
Wow.
we're missing a point too. And I think it's because we're either only focusing on making people happy, or we're only focusing on what we think the ideal culture should be in the abstract. And we're not sort of bringing those together. You know what I mean? Like, we're not having the conversation that says, wait a minute, what do you do that makes you more successful? And we get that information and weave that into our culture. Suddenly people are like, this makes sense. I like this. I'm actually succeeding when we operate this way. And it doesn't become an issue of like, oh, you have a cool culture like Zappos. It becomes an issue of, when we do it this way, we rock. And we just need to sort of bring that up to the surface. And I don't think we're very good at that.
Yeah. It takes more than buying a foosball table to be an innovative organization, right?
That is
So,
true. Nothing wrong with
yeah.
foosball tables.
No, foosball tables
Like,
are awesome, but
I love them as much as the next guy.
it's probably not going to be your culture solution, you know. So Dave, when people are coming back and reporting back to you about what they're seeing as far as using the tool that you have, using the platform PropFuel, uh, what are they saying as far as anecdotally so far about the things that they see that are sort of, we tried this, it didn't work, we tried this and it did? What are some of the things that you know for sure are probably not likely to work, and some of the things that you're finding really are?
Yeah. So the thing that surprised me, and it's not going to surprise Jamie, I don't think, but the thing that surprised me is a platform like ours that's designed to create that's designed to create a continuous feedback loop, right? And it's
Hmm.
the quality of the dialogue is not the same as what Jamie's talking about when he says we need to fly people in. There's a completely different dynamic when you're meeting in person with somebody and having dialogue and communication, right? So
Yeah.
that's incredibly valuable. And we're not trying to replace that. We're not trying to say, look, you never need to see your remote employees again if you have something like PropFuel in place. What PropFuel does is it creates this regular, continuous feedback loop between the entire team themselves and the leadership. Now, here's the thing I started to say that surprised me, that it will not surprise Jamie. It works really, really well in an organization that has a strong and established culture. It does not work very well in an organization that doesn't have a strong culture. So, an organization
Ooh.
that comes to us, and there's been a number of them, there's been a lot of organizations that have come to us and said, look, we have low morale, people are broken, people come in and they push buttons, they're using their own words, but those are the kinds of things they're saying. We really need some help with our culture. PropFuel is not going to fix a culture. What it's going to do is enhance a strong culture. So that's I think that's probably the biggest point I want to make to your question
Right.
is what's the getting is that are thrilled with the dialogue they're seeing from their employees. They're hearing things that they don't hear at the water cooler, that they don't hear out at happy hour, that they don't hear in the meetings. They're hearing things that they wouldn't otherwise have heard, all the way from suggestions to perspectives. But the other thing that's valuable out of it is you're giving people a chance just to speak. How
Right.
often do
Right.
you just want to vent about something? And here's the other thing: it's not oftentimes venting as much as it is expressing a good idea. And then the third point I want to make, the valuable point about this feedback is it's sometimes the feedback doesn't matter.
Hmm.
What matters is the question you ask. And so if you want people to think more about a certain topic, or if you want to plant a seed in your team's head, if you want them to strategically, all you have to do is ask a question. And the reality is, I hope you're listening, but you don't need to. the value comes from simply asking the question and giving them a chance to think about it.
Okay, I
So there,
love that. Like asking the question being such an important part. I'm in love with questions, and I think that
Mhm.
anytime we can give props, haha, to questioning, good questioning, better questioning, that's a good thing. So, yay.
Well, but I want to piggyback on that because I'm doing a webinar in January for the Foundation Center, and it's on building a culture of fundraising.
Mm.
And so I was doing some research on the culture of fundraising conversation, and I got immediately annoyed because it's sort of like we need a culture of fundraising in the nonprofit world. Fundraising has to be everyone's job. It can't just be the fundraiser's job. Everyone has to have fundraising as the job. And I'm like, your solution is to tell people they now have two jobs, right? Like they already have a job, and now you're going to add fundraising to it. The issue fundamentally, I think, is around collaboration, which is you have your program people and you have your fundraising people, and there's this huge gap between them. And part of the issue that I think Dave is raising is they don't even hear each other.
Hmm.
They have no reason to hear each other because they're busy doing other things. But if you create this, like PropFuel, and it's like a perfect play in a playbook. It's like, you know what, we need to have more visibility among these different groups. What if we could use technology to enable those conversations to happen, or those voices to be heard, those questions to be asked? It's like such a great way to use technology that also kind of changes process. Like it used to be, I just did my work and I focused on this, but now I'm like, you know what? I need to listen to some other people before I make this decision. And it changes the way we do the work. And I find, to sort of Dave's original point too, like if the culture is kind of broken and you introduce a new tool, you just sort of amplify the brokenness, right? But if the tool is being introduced in a way where you're saying, folks, we are broken in these ways, but if we want to be better, we're going to move in this direction. And part of that's going to be using this. I think that would change the conversation, even if the culture is not totally fixed. If people knew why they were doing it and saw sort of the end game a little, it would probably change the usage, I think.
Well, can
Dave,
we? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
yeah,
Dave.
do you mind if I ask a question? Step aside, Kiki. So, Jamie, let
Nobody
me
puts
ask you a
Kiki in
question.
the corner.
Nobody puts Kiki in the corner. I'm sorry, Kiki.
I
How do
know.
you how do you fix Elizabeth, please? Dang, look at her. Dang. So I saw a little head swivel on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that
I
was
So
know.
how do you fix a broken culture? That's something that's not our specialty, but I think, is it something that you work on, Jamie? I mean, is that what a lot of organizations bring you in to do at
Yeah,
WorkXO?
I think a broken culture for me is simply a misaligned one. A broken culture is where what's valued inside the culture are behaviors that are not actually driving the success of the organization. And when you're in a place and you're doing stuff and you're like, man, we could be more successful, but I can't. Because basically the culture won't let me do this. It won't let me behave in this way, or it values that person's behavior that's really driving us in the wrong direction, but there's nothing I can do about it. When that is out of alignment, I call the culture broken. So they absolutely bring us in to do the alignment, because the alignment piece requires that you're honest about what your culture is. Like you can really name it, and then that you switch the behaviors inside to be aligned with what drives your success. Once you have that, I think all the other sort of griping ends up going away, because they see, all right, this makes sense. And actually, people who don't like it, once you get aligned, they just leave. And that's sort of better for everybody. Like I told people
Mm.
at the Nimble conference, I'm like, hey, if you're doing culture change and people aren't quitting, you're doing it wrong. Like once you get the alignment, the people who want that stay, the people who don't need to, you need to help them find a job somewhere else, because that's better for everybody.
Yeah, it always makes me think of the Zappos example where, they pay them to leave, right? They pay these people to leave if it's not the right fit. So, I mean, I want to piggyback on Dave, the very polite Dave's comment, and talk about what are some of the different elements of the workplace that you examine when you go in and you're looking. You have this workplace, the genome. What are some of the different elements that feed into that?
Did you say the genome?
No, not the
The
genome. People are going to be so confused when they're listening to this as the audio later.
What are we talking about here? The genome or the gnome?
Yes, the workplace gnome is a totally different topic, KiKi.
The workplace gnome.
All right, KiKi, what are we talking about here?
I know, totally different thing. But I do want to talk about that a little bit and talk about the different pieces that you examine when you go in, because like when you're talking to people, looking at the different elements of what can go wrong or what can go really right, and establishing what that culture is. What are you seeing that, or what are you examining in these different pieces where things can go awry?
In the, is this for me in the culture? Like
Yes.
What are the core components? So
yes,
and actually the GNOME model. Sorry, I couldn't resist. The pieces that we measure in there actually come out of the research from Humanize. Remember that dates us a little while. Humanize, and when millennials take over, both involved research that we're pulling out elements of organizations that connect to what make us human. Because if you're not connected to that, it doesn't make sense. And people always tell me like, culture change, people resist change. People do not resist change. They resist doing things that don't make sense to them, that are against their interests, or that they think are stupid. And so if you can at least make sense, then you have a chance of shifting. And so we very intentionally wanted to measure culture along things like agility and collaboration and inclusion and innovation and transparency, all of which we wrote about in both books, because that makes people want to know where your culture fits on that, because that's what it means to be human. And then the other piece that our continuum for measuring is not about good or bad, which we think is really hugely important. It's about, on any of those elements, are you more traditional or are you more futurist? And again, one is not right and wrong, although I think in the big picture we're kind of heading towards futurist. But that, like the details, when it comes to your culture, you can be very traditional and still be very successful. But people need to know, where are you? Are we traditional? If we're, like I always say, if you're a nuclear power plant, I hope you're traditional around innovation. Like, I don't want you hacking things and experimenting too much, or at least there's some controls around that. You can be very traditional and still be successful. But people need to know that, so they know whether they fit in, and they can sort of make that determination of, yeah, but that doesn't work for us. That doesn't make us successful. So maybe we need to shift it. So agility, collaboration, growth, transparency, innovation, those things, I know that's sort of buzzword bingo, but if you get underneath the surface of it, you get right at the stuff that Dave's talking about, like feedback. Like, can we handle difficult feedback in this culture? That is a very specific building block within collaboration. Are we good facilitators? Like, you got to get down to that level. And when people can say, yeah, this is who we are, then if you try and do some changes, introduce some plays in the playbook, people will go, okay, I get it. And then they're more likely to be on board.
Right. So
I love that point about it not being right or wrong. I think oftentimes starting another tech company, I think about the characteristics that I want in PropFuel, some of the characteristics we had in our culture at Peach, and it very quickly go to the right and wrong definition of what a good culture should be. But then I went and spoke at a military function. It was with an organization called American Dream U. We were talking to soldiers down at Fort Bragg that were exiting the military after some 15, 20 years.
Wow.
These are not young kids. I mean, these are full adults, well into their career. They're warriors, and they're coming now out to the civilian world, trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives. And it's a major, major identity shift. But the point being, some of the conversations I had with them were around culture and were around the environment that they've been growing up in. We all talk about how failure is a wonderful thing and we should fail, right? Failure in the military means something much, much different. And so failure is not a valued cultural characteristic. Yeah. So it is interesting if you look at different organizations, how the culture can play into their success.
Yeah. Well, and so how does this all relate? What we're talking about, reinventing the workplace. But as I was talking about, like as I was sending out some reminders for this to go out there, I kept using the word reimagining the workplace in 2018 rather than reinventing or rethinking the workplace in 2018. Are there ways that we should be rethinking the workplace in 2018 as we go into a new year and start to think about reflecting on some of the changes that have happened in society, to technology, to the way we communicate? Are there some things that we should be thinking about as far as making changes or maybe reevaluating the way that we look at the workplace?
I will, going back to what you raised before about sort of virtual and gig economy stuff. I am seeing more and more that people are going to have multiple jobs in like at the same time. Like that's just going to be normal. And I don't think our workplaces are set up for that. And I don't mean this like legal administrative stuff, which is an issue. I'm not trying to dismiss it, but I mean, just from how you do work, we had a client do the culture assessment, and when they developed their priorities were all around things like accountability, trust, and that's because 50% were at a home office and 50% were remote.
Yeah.
Right. And so like we don't know how to do that. Like I mean we do, but it's not that if it's not in the we've always done it that way category. And so you get a lot of people who will express frustration like, oh, I don't know if these people are doing their job, or these people don't understand what I'm experiencing, and like we don't know how to do it. But you'd be surprised at how easy it is to do once you embrace the fact that you don't know how to do it. You know what I mean? Like then you come up with some idea, like let's run this, let's do these meetings differently, let's make sure that we include virtual people when we have a happy hour. Like I know it's sort of small stuff back to the foosball table, but like there are many things that we default to our old way of doing it, and we don't even realize there could be a new way. I'm working with a big global company. Like they do all their stuff virtual. They do every meeting virtually, and I hear so many people complain like, "Oh, it's hard, and I can't do video." I'm like, figure it out, folks. Like it's the 21st century, you know. So I think there's so many opportunities for the way we do things, like just being radically different and trying it out. And I'm encouraged that some are doing it, but I'm a little annoyed that some are slow. To be honest.
It's interesting. I've never been a very good futurist. I've never been able to look forward with any kind of accuracy.
Dave's a presentist.
What is so funny? I'm a presentist. That's why Christmas is my favorite holiday. What? You hear that? So it's actually not. I like Thanksgiving. But having said that, I'm a lover.
Oh God!
I got all my little quick stuff. Where the hell was I going with this? So
you're not a good futurist.
I'm not a good futurist. So where I like to live, and Jamie, to your point, is more in the present and looking in the near past. And what changes are we seeing happen today? What is actually happening today in our offices with the people that work with us? Now, I do have a fairly closed mind because I'm so focused on the businesses that I'm involved in and in my customers. So that's my focus. So when I'm off invited to work with the military, it's like mind blowing because it's a totally different environment for me, and I see something. Sorry, buddy. I see something completely out of my element. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, some of the things that I see happening right now in my world, and I think in a lot of the association worlds and a lot of the vendors in the association space, there's a new work, and this isn't the past couple of years. I mean, this is the past 10, 15 years that this stuff is starting to appear, and that is remote workplaces is what we've been talking about. More people want to work remotely. Second, and this is probably an even bigger one that I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on, but the importance of identifying that why, the Simon Sinek concept of what's your why, or finding that purpose or the vision, whatever you want to call it, all leads down to the same thing: is why the heck are we coming to work every day when there's so many other things I'd rather be doing, right? So why do I get up in the morning? Now, it's easy for a lot of us that are later in our careers to identify that why, because we have a passion for what we do. But when you have somebody who's 20, 22, 25 years old, how do you teach them? How do you engage them? Right. So going back to the whole why we're here to help organizations. What's that?
I said full circle.
Full circle. So how do we get the younger people in an organization to actually believe in something and to share your vision so that everybody's pointing and aligned, Jamie? How do we get everybody aligned? And I think that's a really, really important topic that we need to address. In the past, my dad's day, when he used to work at United Technology for 30 years, and then one day he walks in and they lay him off. That's the old school environment. Oh, but they give him a nice watch on the way to that 30 years. I'm a little bitter about it, if you can't tell. But that's a different environment. They laid down the law. This is how it is. Not everybody. Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard. Did I say that right? Chouinard?
Let's say
Yvon Chouinard. So that guy, I think, was a real, that he read his book, Let My People Go Surfing. This guy created an awesome culture in the 60s and early 70s, where everything that we're trying to do in tech companies and small businesses today is stuff he was doing 40 years ago. Unlimited vacation, take a long lunch, and literally go surfing. It was some awesome stuff. So my point being, it was not everybody was like that back in the day. It changed dramatically to be the norm, to create an environment where people are thinking about the purpose and the why they're there at work.
I will say, from a data point of view, we only have about, I think, 30 organizations that have completed the genome. But of the 64 individual building blocks that we measure, passion and purpose scores as the most futurist. So it is the one thing that people are already on to. And so when we ask people, hey, does the work you do really matter to someone or something? People are saying yes. They're leaning more towards yes, definitely, than towards no, the other way, more traditional. And traditional.
What the hell does more futurist mean?
Meaning more aligned.
Does that mean, are you saying I'm a futurist after all?
Well, I'm gonna grant you an honorary futurist.
No. Don't grant him that. No.
President of the Presentists Club. Futurist means aligned with future of work. Basically, in a future, more human-oriented workplace, everybody cares about passion and purpose. Everybody is transparent. Everybody focuses on inclusion. Everybody values innovation. Not like you don't have to be totally futurist, but those concepts are sort of represented in future of work stuff. And where the current organizations are more aligned with future is around passion and purpose. Interesting, where they're least aligned is around people-centric organizations. So designing organizations around the needs of employees, which actually goes right back to that sort of remote thing. Like, what if your people want to work remote? Well, then we design an organization so that the people, the users of our culture, our employee, like Dave, you're focused on the user, right? You focus on the customer. From a culture point of view, your employees are your users. And we should be designing around their needs, just like we would a software product. So that's the one where we struggle. Like I see this all the time. We're embracing the ideas and the concepts, but we're not embracing the systems and processes and structures that move us towards the future. So we're all about future focus, but we don't run experiments or do prototyping or do beta testing. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's we love the ideas, but we're not quite backing it up with processes and implementation stuff.
So let's talk about the testing and getting into a mindset where you are, and it makes me think of lean startup methodology. It makes me think of, instead of focusing so much on fail fast, it's not even about that. It's really about constructing better questions, asking better questions, running those tests so that you can regularly be, and I'm not even going to say the word innovation, because then that makes people jump into, inventing the light bulb or something. I'm talking about the regular improvements and the trying new things. And it not being some sort of let's blow everything up, but it's actually no, let's do these small smart tests and learn from them so that we can have a little bit of incremental change or dramatic change based on those tests that we take. So when you talk to different organizations about ways to improve the workplace, whether it's through culture, engagement, what have you, is there an element of testing that you end up advising that they do, or do they ask you about that on a regular basis? Are people curious about that?
I mean, I try and infuse it with the concept when we get into the culture change piece with the concept of the playbook. Like, I'm almost embarrassed that we use the playbook metaphor. Like, really, a sports metaphor in business? How original, like, right? Like, this is the best you could come up with, Nodder. I'm like, okay, exactly. But one of our clients came up with a playbook. They happen to be from Alabama, so I think they value playbooks down there.
Yeah, right.
And I like the playbook because a playbook has many plays, and some plays are kind of bigger than others. And you're constantly drawing from your playbook, and you're running a play, and you're seeing if it works. And if it doesn't work, you change it. And if it works, you do it again, or you amplify it, whatever it is. But it's not like you have to have the complete plan. You have to have the complete total vision of the new culture and then convince everyone that your vision is right. It's more like, we have these principles. We think they're pretty important. We wrote up a bunch of plays that seem to be driving us in that direction. Let's run some. And so from a culture point of view, for me, I mean, this is what I'm seeing within organizations. It kind of takes the pressure off. It's like, I don't have to solve the culture issue today. What I need to do is implement a new system for giving each other better feedback, and then as that run, and of course we already identified that was critical, blah, blah, blah. I need to do A, B, and C to make sure our remote workers feel more included, or the trust is improved, whatever it is. But you just keep running plays, you just keep doing it. When it comes to like building the capacity for experimentation, honestly, I don't see a lot of organizations asking me for that. If anything, I'm pointing out that they're a little weak in that area. But it's not, it just doesn't tend to be something they know how to do. So that's it.
So what are the questions that people should be asking? If it's all about asking better questions, and focusing on that, obviously the why, right? But what are the questions that we should be asking as we go into 2018 when it comes to not just reinventing, but improving the workplace and making our working lives better?
What are the questions we should be asking as business leaders to our team? Or I'm sorry, so what are the questions we should be asking?
As business leaders to our team, we'll start there. I mean, I also think that it's interesting. I haven't even gone into the side of evaluating a workplace before you go in and choose to be a part of a team. And that's a different question. And it's definitely something that's worth exploring. But what are the questions from a leader's standpoint for the workplace as you're going into 2018 that you should be asking yourself?
So there's, Jamie, if I could, just to follow up on what Jamie said, and I think this whole concept we're talking about, if I'm not mistaken, the term Kaizen, I think is that a Japanese word? Kaizen?
Hi.
Thank you. Hi. But I think, yeah. God damn, I'm sorry.
I know, you're such an asshole.
What are we talking about?
I'm not helping.
But Kaizen is the continuous feedback concept. It's not major adjustments. And I think there's a lot of organizations like ours, Jamie, that are constantly looking to improve. And a lot of the organizations we work with, our customers, and I think this is also kind of interesting, so in my last business pitch, the LMS oftentimes replaced another LMS. So they would have processes that they might want to improve, but basically they need an LMS, and they always had an LMS, and they're just putting in a new one for one reason or another. What's unique about the work I'm doing now, I mean, there's a lot of differences, which I love about it. That's one of the reasons why I did this, is because it's so much different from what I was doing at Peach. But one thing that's really unique is a lot of the organizations that take PropFuel on are doing it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be something that they bought into, the concept, but it's rare that we're stealing a client from a competitor. It's rare that we're going in and saying, hey, replace your current feedback and recognition platform with ours because it's better, it's cheaper, it's whatever. We're saying, look, it's really valuable if you consider engaging your team. And here's how. So everybody we're going to about this change and Kaizen. It's one little improvement at a time. And here's the cool thing is this platform then leads to more improvements down the road. So how do you get someone to embrace change? And here's the thing that makes it really, really, really hard. And this is not a new concept, but it has to be driven oftentimes with passion. And the people that have the most passion oftentimes in an organization have leadership. So it has to be driven with some consistent, strong level of passion, whatever the initiative. And then the key is to transfer that passion from the one person that's leading the organization, 2 or 3 people on the executive team, now to the entire organization. So everybody's feeling that passion within the organization. And some things will make it that far. And some things, when you throw them against the wall, will just fall to the ground and disappear. Mm-hmm. That's my experience with innovation. That's my experience with Zen and constant improvement is lots of trying, lots of passion, disseminating the passion, and then letting things wash away if they don't work.
Mm. Well, and I would add because I agree with what you say, Dave, and I think that part of the difference or a difference of the ones that sort of fade away and the ones that stick is when back to the alignment piece, when the passion is clearly connected to something that everyone else sees as valuable or driving the success of the organization. Because and this relates to engagement, but I think maybe, well, I don't want to pretend I know this from a theoretical point of view, but I think a piece of the heart of engagement is I am successful in doing my work. People want to be successful. They want to know, and they want to know that they're part of something that is successful, and they want to know that they are being successful in their work. That is a huge core of engagement, I think, in any workplace. And so back to KiKi's question of what's the questions we should be asking. Here's my 2018 challenge for everybody. What drives the success of your organization? Answer that to me in crystal clear terms, not high level, not detailed. We need to improve sales by 3%, not high level. We need to make customers happy, but mid level. That those concept principle level, what is the difference between success and not success for you? Because when I ask everybody in every industry that question, I get blank stares. People do not know how to answer that question, and I think it's a huge gap both on culture and engagement.
Dave looks like he wants to answer that question.
Yeah, an answer. I've had an answer for that one for 15 years. It's my fucking team, man. it's the people. My focus is on my employees. And I grew up with the emphasis being on the customer. And when I say grew up like that, I remember having a lawn care business in high school, like everybody else probably in this call. But I remember really screwing it up. I remember really screwing it up. I made a mistake. My dad was not an entrepreneur. He was an engineer. He even knew. It's like, Dave, dude, he didn't say dude. I got that from my wife, actually. But he said, Dave, you really need to focus on the customer. The customer is always right. You know, these things we heard in the 80s and the 90s. And generally speaking, the concepts are good. They're solid. Mm-hmm. But what shifted for me in the past 15 years, Jamie, and this is the answer, is if I focus on my team, if I focus on my employees, and it's not just recruiting the right people, that's a big part of it. Mm-hmm. But once we have that team, if I focus on my team and I make them really feel the passion, understand the vision, and clearly communicate a plan, oftentimes which includes their help, now you've got this incredible engine for getting upon the passion that you feel. And if you've created that, then you don't need to even worry about the customers, because everyone else is going to be worrying about the customers for you. And so that's what drove the success of Peach, what success we had. I think that's what drives the success in PropFuel as well.
And so that is an example of cultural clarity. Okay. And your culture, Dave, like that clarity, that may not work at every organization. It may not work in every context. That's not the point. But you have that clarity about what drives success. And I'm going to guess, and this goes, well, maybe back to recruiting and stuff, but the people that come on board agree with that. Like they're aligned with that. And so that like makes sense. And this is my point to everyone else. Dave, you're exempt. You answered. I give you an A+. Everyone else needs to answer that question, because again, huge publicly traded companies, I talk to senior level people and they cannot articulate to me something as clear as what you just said.
Wow.
And I used to ask this when we would do the action planning on the culture projects, almost casually, like, oh, they're all interested in the culture data. That's all super cool because they did the survey and it's all the numbers and it's very pretty. Like, ooh, ah. I'm like, yeah. So how is this going to connect to what drives success? Hey, by the way, let's just talk about that. What drives success? And they would not be able to give me an answer. So this is my challenge to everybody.
Hey, Colleen, can you hear us?
Hey guys, yeah, can you hear me?
All right. So it's good to have you. So I saw, for everyone who's listening and not actually seeing this, so you're listening to the podcast later, one of the great benefits of having this live on Crowdcast is that we're able to invite different people on. And there's something going on over in the chat that I didn't get a chance to talk about. So I figured I would invite the person on. So Colleen, you responded to some of the commentary, some of the discussion that was happening here, and you talked about a blog post you wrote. And so I wanted to invite you on to just maybe share a few words about that and how it pertains to the conversation we're having today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just a lot of the things that both Dave and Jamie have said have really resonated with me personally. I just wrote this blog post about the MemberClick's mission and values and how it all really just ties like extremely cohesively into what we do every day. And Dave, when you were talking about Simon Sinek and his, what's your why? Everybody here has their own why, and it's different for everybody, just, depending on what their function is and who they're talking to every day. But it's really cool just, collectively to see, while we might come to work for different reasons every day, we all have the same mission and value that we're working towards. And it's really made all the difference in just having a strong workplace.
Yeah.
Hey, Colleen, how long have you been at MemberClicks?
So I have only been with the company for a couple months now since the acquisition. I was with WebLink before for about 1.5 years now. So, only been with MemberClicks for a couple months, but I mean, just in that amount of time, the feeling that I have about our mission and values is incredible.
So this is actually a really, really great opportunity to maybe investigate what Jamie was talking about a little bit before about a blending of cultures and how that can be complicated. Because being a part of the company, it's been, 2 months you just said? Been about 2 months. And so, WebLink had its culture and then MemberClicks with its culture. What have you noticed as far as the way that it's been in this transition? Because especially in the association space right now, especially with technology companies right now, it is definitely something that's on people's minds. Mm-hmm. Somebody in the background is real loud.
Yeah, sorry, we're actually in a co-working space.
Yeah,
so I've been
that's part of the culture, right?
Right, yeah. So I mean, I would definitely say that a lot of our values and the mission overall were very similar. A lot of the same things that we were striving for. It's just the importance of having it defined and written down and reiterated over and over and over again, and just tied back into everything you do is what I've found to be the and just super important.
Yeah, Well, I'd be curious to hear what Jamie would ask or what he'd have to say in this sort of situation, because what would be some of the questions you would ask to say to Colleen to establish the health of that transition or whatever. Not in because there are a lot of different organizations who are going through mergers and acquisitions right now, so this is definitely applicable to a lot of people in our community.
Well, I think the comments you made about hearing it over and over again, like, so I mean the whole onboarding process, which completely is transformed in an acquisition context, because it's not like it's sort of onboarding but not onboarding. Like, you've been working at this place for a year and a half, but now you're new, but you're not new, so it's a little confusing. And I mean the lesson. So I'm hearing that you guys did the tell them you're going to tell them and tell them you told them, like, you cannot over communicate this. And I think we really fall down on that. I think particularly at the leadership level. And I've not been a leader in a merger or acquisition, so I can't speak from experience, but I gotta imagine that's really stressful. And there's just so much flying and there's so much going on, but you have to remember to say, and don't forget the values. And this is what our culture is. And this is like, so I mean, like, I'm forgiving of people who forget to do that because there's so much flying. But there's a downside to doing it, and it's a real discipline. And it sounds like you guys had it. I think the only question I would ask, or what I'm curious about, because I'm not going to like put you on the spot, Kelly, but I'm curious about the sort of mission, vision, values. I want to know that gets down to the middle level that I just described. Mm-hmm. I don't want only like 3 words like trust and collaboration and awesomeness. Like that's great, but you got to get down to, and here's what it looks like, and here's how it plays out in real life, and here's how I know it's happening, and here's what it looks like when it's not happening. Like, I need that spelled out. And so as long as the documentation and the artifact you have inside your culture clarify that, then I'm with you. But then I assume they do.
Yeah, and yeah, they definitely do.
So thank you, Colleen. I'm gonna take you out off of the hot seat now. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I clicked her off too fast. Sorry, Colleen. Thank you for joining us. If you want to check out her link that she shared, her blog post that she shared, we have it in the chat here if you want to check it out on Crowdcast, but I will also post it in the show notes on the podcast. So if you're listening to this on iTunes, just look to the show notes and the link will be there. So that was really, really interesting to me, you guys, because there are so many people who are going through that right now. And I think from a leadership perspective, that has to be just really hard to figure out how to navigate that. And we're humans with human emotions. And I imagine that if you are part of a company that has had a strong culture, or even if it hasn't had a strong culture, you feel a sense of loyalty to it, so that even if it's been acquired, it's merged with another one, you have to be thinking, am I being disloyal to just abandon what this culture has been so far? I mean, it's a real identity crisis, right?
Yeah, I think you nailed a really important topic. Loyalty. I struggle with that word in the workplace. Mm-hmm. I'm loyal to my wife. I'm loyal to my children, and I'm loyal to my dogs. And
your gnome.
No, now he tossed that gnome out. He gets control. I can tell that right now. Yeah.
And you know, to a very, very strong degree, I'm loyal to my employees and my customers too. And that's true. However, it's difficult to balance loyalty with the oftentimes the right decision, right? Mm-hmm. So let's look at the most obvious example. You have an employee, you like them, you've done everything you can to coach them in the right direction. They're underperforming. There's no role for them. You need to let people go. You need to fire people for performance-related issues. And not just forget about the finances. performance related issues, there's times when you have to let people go. And oftentimes they're nice people and you like them and they have a family. There's no loyalty there. The loyalty may come in how long it takes to fire them. And sometimes in that case, loyalty can be a detriment. Let's look at the acquisition or sale of business, something I went through with Peach. To a certain degree, I would have loved to have kept Peach the way it was forever, because it was really, really, for the most part, generally speaking, still a job for people, including myself. But it was a really good job. It was a really good place to work. And I know that go through an acquisition, it stirs everything up. Some things are going to get better and a lot of things are going to get worse. But, and again, this is where I'm challenging the concept of loyalty, because if it was 100% loyalty, I would have done everything I could to keep it the same forever. But it's just not realistic. And so you have to figure out where's the balance between loyalty, number one, and figuring out what's best for the business, number two, and not in any particular order, what's best for customers, what's best for your employees, and what's best for your family. You know, you gotta, so the question is, where does your loyalty lie? So loyalty in business, I don't like it. What I do like is making sure that you've created an awesome job for your employees, created an awesome value for your customers. And with that comes a desire to stay there. As soon as that desire goes away, then they should go away too. Not once in there did I reference loyalty. So this comes, it's basic economics to me. It's like, if you're creating value, if I'm creating value, I'm sorry for going on and on, but if I create value as an employer, my people are going to stay. If I create value as a vendor, my customers are going to stay. When I stop creating that value, they should go. And that to me is loyalty in terms of business. Took me a little while to get there. Sorry.
No, that's good. I